I will start with a brief presentation on what is zero waste and what it looks like in practice when taken to the local level. And we will then have inputs from the cities of Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Dortmund, and Ljubljana on their waste management system and zero waste efforts in general. And finally, we'll have a more interactive discussion on different specific instruments towards zero waste. So to start with, you may have heard it in our introduction. There are two ways of referring to this whole topic. There's zero waste and there's circular economy. So zero waste is probably a concept that the Americans around here are more familiar with because it's much more popular in North America than it is in Europe. And circular economy has gained more momentum in Europe since the circular economy package put forward by the European Commission. There are not too many differences between the two terms. We just chose zero waste to reflect a specific focus on municipal solid waste, as opposed to circular economy, which tends to focus on all resources flowing through urban system, be it energy, water, chemicals, etc. And so zero waste refers to waste management and planning approaches which emphasize waste prevention and aim at bringing discarded materials back into the loop so they can become resources for other use. So as you can imagine, zero waste is not really a concrete goal. Usually what is meant with zero waste cities is that these cities are sending less than 10% of their waste to landfills or incineration. So it's rather, when you think about it, the pollution associated with waste that is reduced to almost zero, not necessarily the waste that ends up being produced that is reduced to zero. And to ensure that environmental impacts are still reduced to a minimum, zero waste frameworks are often paired with a life cycle analysis, which I assume most are aware of already, but it basically means that all the stages of a product's life, from raw material extraction through manufacture, distribution, maintenance, disposal, etc., all those stages are considered. And so when you consider waste from a life cycle perspective, you actually have to try and act as early in the life cycle as possible, so as early as when the resource is extracted. And that's where the waste management hierarchy comes in. You're probably already familiar with these guiding principles made of words that all start with R, but I'll give a brief overview. It starts with reduce, and the question is, what supports the use of less material and less toxic material? What is it in our system that is not needed? What can we do without some resources? And then the next step is to consider the resources we do need and to rethink or redesign that's their consumption. And that's where rethink and redesign comes in, the second step, which consists in taking advantage of synergies and to consume less resources. So this dimension is very linked to the question of ownership, of sharing instead of owning, of leasing instead of buying, of designing for longevity instead of planning for obsolescence. The next step is reuse, where discarded products or components are used again for the same purpose for which they were conceived. And then there's recycle and composting. Those are recovery operations by which waste materials are reprocessed into products, material, or substances, whether for the original purpose or for other purposes. And the main difference between recycling and reuse is that with recycling, the product or component is broken down into raw materials, which are then reprocessed. And with reuse, the product is not broken down. It may go through some repair stage, but it remains essentially the same, which is why reuse is high on the hierarchy, because it involves less materials consumption in the process. Recover is recovery of energy, chemicals, or other resources during waste disposal. And this is the least favorable option because there is a risk to create a lock-in situation in which an infrastructure is dependent on a continuous flow of waste to operate. And that's why it comes very last, because it decreases the flexibility of the system. And so now, after this very conceptual overview, how does it look like in in practice. And those are examples from ICLEI members from around the world. So reduce can refer to rewarding waste minimization efforts, such as in Johannesburg, where they have an environmental awards in schools, or bans of disposable, like in Seoul. Rethink and redesign is very much about sharing ownership. We have an example from Ljubljana that perhaps Zala you'll tell more about later, but there's also a community tool library in Toronto that is quite well known. An interesting example of reuse from Vaxio in Sweden is that they are constructing and almost finishing a reuse village, which will be a stop on the way to the municipal recycling plant. And in the village, visitors will be encouraged to give away or even sell things that can have a value for someone else before they bring anything to the recycling plants. So it's really putting the hierarchy forward. And of course, there's this phenomenon of repair cafes that is now everywhere in the world. For recycling and composting, we wanted to share two interesting examples. One is from Curitiba, which is encouraging recycling by rewarding citizens who recycle in community currency so that it can be reused in the community. And also an example from Austin, where residents can book composting collection, which is done by bike, and they have access to discount in local restaurants or local repair shop. And recovering, interesting example perhaps from Rotterdam, where currently there's a waste to chemicals plant that is being constructed where non-recyclable mixed waste is processed into synthesis gas and then into clean methanol for the chemical industry and the transport sector. So maybe to start a bit with the interaction, Oli, as you were the one who suggested this topic, do you feel like the waste management hierarchy is being used in your city? Is it seen as a priority? Or do you feel like there's a heavier focus on one of the stages?
I do not feel like the reuse cycle is well utilized here. Most of our waste goes to landfill, and in Cincinnati and probably in many parts of the US, the cost of going to landfill really drives decision making. So when we have tried to implement alternatives, ultimately the markets bear out and landfilling wins over and over again. So we are looking for economic alternatives, new ways of thinking about this.
Yeah, and that's where maybe it's important to bring in the positive, the opportunity aspects of this waste management hierarchy. What does it bring to a community to kind of make the case against low disposal costs? And that brings me to my next slide. See waste as an opportunity. First, of course, it's an opportunity to address growing waste challenges. Of course, we could talk about the China ban that is making it hard to find markets for recycled materials, but also generally, 50 tons of household waste are thrown away every second globally, and we are not very good at decreasing this amount, despite technological innovation in recycling, etc. Even in countries like Germany, which have very high recycling rates, it's rather stagnating the amount of municipal solid waste that is being produced every year. And it's because, and partly this is because the waste we see is linked to unseen waste all along the life cycle. It's estimated that every bag of household waste has produced around 70 bags of waste upstream during extraction and production processes. And that's why the hierarchy is so important in the end. Another driver is perhaps to anticipate national and subnational regulation. That's definitely the case in Europe, where the EU circular economy package is pushing local regulation, and municipalities will be required to recycle 65% of municipal waste by 2030. So that's also a driver and an opportunity to foresee change. Of course, create viable alternatives to landfills and incinerators, because even in places where they are cheap, they have a limited lifespan, and they create huge environmental impacts, and we'll look at it a bit more later. Perhaps an economic argument is that it's a way to invest in your community and create opportunities for local businesses, an opportunity to relocalize production, to foster innovation, and to develop the social economy at the local level. Often reuse centers or recycling centers are used in cities as an opportunity to reintegrate marginalized people back into the community and back into employment. And here I would like to mention maybe an interesting figure from the reuse network. 70 jobs are created for every 1,000 tons of material reused, against 36 for recycling, 6 for landfill, and 1 for incineration. So the job dimension is definitely important in the waste management hierarchy. It's also an opportunity to mainstream sustainable and healthy lifestyles. Usually when you hear people talking about what they do for the environment, they refer to sorting out their waste, because waste is a very tangible, visible, and smelly externality. And climate change doesn't pile up in your bin, but waste does. And so this is an opportunity to raise awareness on sustainable lifestyles. And we'll look into this maybe later, because some of you have very interesting frameworks on this. As I shared in the knowledge bundle, there was an OECD report that shows that over 50% of all greenhouse gases emissions are related to materials management. So we see that when you consider the full life cycle of waste, it's actually a huge driver of climate change. Another point, and we have some experts in urban agriculture among us, so yeah, zero waste is an opportunity to support sustainable agriculture. With compost, so that, for instance, instead of using pesticides that decrease soil quality in the long run and are detrimental to human health, we use organic waste. And finally, it's an opportunity to improve the resilience of your city, a city that is able to do better with less, and which waste management system are effective, is a city more resilient to external shocks. So now enough of me talking. I would like to hear from you, and to start maybe with Anne Shirdy from the City of Baltimore, and maybe Ava Richardson. I would like to know what zero waste initiatives are in place in Baltimore. Can you maybe take us through what it's currently looking like? Yeah, so over to you, if that's okay.
Sure. Like Oliver said, in Cleveland, in Baltimore, the vast majority of our waste, we have a city-owned landfill. So that's been a free for us to put our waste into. Free, that we don't pay a tipping fee, but obviously we're maintaining the landfill and it's running out of space. And we also have a local incinerator, a waste-to-energy plant that was built in the 1980s that's extremely polluting to our city because it hasn't been properly up. The controls for the pollution efforts have not been properly updated. So those have risen to the top recently as people have become aware of the pollution coming out of there, and also of the landfill limited time that's left on that. So I work at the city's Office of Sustainability, which in 2015 we put out what we call a waste to wealth report, looking on 3 aspects of waste in our city and trying to turn them into some economic, have something that has economic potential. So I'll touch on those 3 right now. We have city wood waste with all the trees that come down in our city, and for 30 years, they have been either burned in the old days in a huge incinerator, or more recently, in the last number of years, just left to rot. And about every 8 or 10 years, it pays hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring in a grinder to chip them up. So what we did is we took a loan out from our finance department and hired somebody to start running a business out of this area to divert the wood waste and to look at creating new markets for the wood. And so now, instead of paying to oaks and things into boards and beams, and we're actually using them in our city's capital projects. We're also selling them to local woodworkers and artisans, and we're running a membership firewood program. So that's been a huge turnaround for making that our wood products to sell to people. The City of Baltimore has a lot of vacant buildings, and we have for many years that have just been rotting away. And in the last couple of years, we've infused some funding, a city, a state, and other funding to taking down an unprecedented number of these buildings. And we saw this opportunity because they were, slated to go to the landfill or the incinerator. And we passed a low bid exemption rule that would allow deconstruction bids on demolition RFPs to be 20% higher than other bids and still be considered the lowest bid. So that deconstruction companies could go in there and get the bid and then recover the valuable bricks and the lumber and the architectural salvage that was in those buildings. As a result of this, a social enterprise business was formed, and which has a storefront that people can go and buy deconstructed products. And it also, the actual deconstruction and salvage of the building created jobs and job training for people in Baltimore who have barriers to employment. So that's an ongoing, it has its issues, but that's an ongoing and pretty successful aspect of our waste to will. And then the third piece that we looked at is our food waste. And about a month ago, our mayor released our city's food waste and recovery plan, which was created that the people representing business and nonprofits and universities and residents with short and mid and long-term strategies. As a result of us putting out this plan, the Natural Resources Defense Council out of New York and the Rockefeller Foundation chose Baltimore as one of 2 pilot cities. We're just finalizing our agreement with them, and this is going to help us advance our work on food waste and recovery. So, we're offering this as it's a guidance document for all the people in the city who are working on food waste and diversion. So we have been doing a lot in this couple different areas, but we have a lot more to do. And we also have a tool library. Last year, our city banned styrofoam in food and restaurants. We have some small youth-led. We have a small youth-led compost collective, and we're trying to build up that area. So we have a lot in our strategy to start working on around food. And we also, the other big thing is convincing our big elephant in the room, which is for us, is our Department of Public Works. They're just collectors of waste and recycling, but to start shifting the conversation about more local recycling, local food waste and recovery. So that's an overview of where we are at the moment.
Okay, well, thanks for the very nice overview. It was all very interesting, so maybe if anyone has a question, I'll open the floor now.
This is Oliver. I have a question.
Go ahead.
My understanding is that Pittsburgh has a mandatory recycling ordinance. The question would be, is that true, and is it working?
Yes, it's true. No, it's not working. The problem is enforcement. We have a lack of enforcement.
Baltimore has the same thing. Yeah, same exact.
I'm sorry, will you say that again?
I said Baltimore has the same thing. The state of Maryland has a mandatory recycling rate, and we are not close to meeting it, but there's no enforcement around it.
So in my mind, enforcement would be very challenging, but you would also sort of loop in a certain percentage of your residents who want to follow the law. And if they know that it's illegal to to not recycle, then they won't.
I think the larger problem is not with residents, although that's an issue, but with corporate partners, businesses. I mean, even Starbucks doesn't recycle here often.
How is the policy enforced?
That's a great question. I do not know.
The other problem with recycling now is because of the change in the China rule for contamination is that the city of Baltimore is paying more to recycle than to get rid of our trash, which is a whole issue we're going to have to start dealing with much more closely.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and we'll look later at instruments on how to, like economic instruments, to make the case for recycling or for reuse when the market conditions are not there. We'll discuss this a bit later. In the meantime, since we've already started hearing from Shelley, if you could give us a brief overview of what Pittsburgh Zero Waste, or where Pittsburgh Zero Waste Journey stands currently.
Okay, well, I'm Shelley Danko-Day. I'm the food policy advisor for the city of Pittsburgh, and I work in the city planning department on with vacant lots quite often. We have over 7,000 vacant lots in the city because of the loss of population back in the 70s and 80s when the steel mills closed. And so we were left with houses that were in decay, and we had to secure them for public safety reasons, and then oftentimes demolish them in varying degrees of care. So we ended up with 7,000 vacant lots that we don't technically own, so we can't really sell outright unless someone is interested. We have to go through a process that quiets the title. That takes about 18 months and costs $1,000. So we don't really do that. So we're left with these lots that we have to maintain, and we really can't keep up with that maintenance. So we created this process a couple of years ago, and that's when I was brought on to create the vacant lot toolkit and the adopt a lot process. So we allow people to use vacant lots for food, flower, or rain gardens. And as part of that, we created a soil policy. My background is in urban agriculture and working with youth, and so lead in the soil is a big concern to me. And I know a lot of these community groups that work in vacant lots and community gardens involve children a lot because they're teaching the youth about food. So we came up with a policy for lead levels, and so that's a really important aspect of this process. But also wanting to get more into the composting and creating good soils, because the soils are of questionable quality, and there's, besides the contamination, there's just not a lot of substance there. So the composting is in the city of Pittsburgh. It wasn't actually technically a thing. It wasn't in our municipal code. So when I went to talk about getting it as a use on its, so we classified it as an urban agriculture activity. So that qualifies for the food, flower, rain gardens as part of the Adopt a Lot program. But then technically composting wasn't in our municipal code, so it wasn't outlined as a thing that existed. So we had to write an ordinance to include that in our municipal code. So that's just now, after 2 years of working with various departments, and it's actually environmental services part of the code. We have written just basic outline of what compost is and what can't be included in it, like no human manure, no pet feces, but all kinds of other good organic stuff. Worked with the DEP on that too. So now compost will, hopefully by the end of the year, compost will be an actual written thing. And the reason that it was important to have that be part of our municipal code was because environmental services, and they're the ones, I didn't mean to be flipped before, but enforcement would be for recycling would be done through environmental services, and they just don't have the manpower to do the enforcement. So they get calls all the time from inspectors who go out from our permits, licenses, and inspections department, and they go out and if they're called for some sort of nuisance pile of debris at somebody's house, and they go out there and the person is saying, well, no, this is composting. They don't have any guidelines for that. So they would call environmental services and be like, we know composting is good, but what does it look like, and what should we be looking for, and what isn't compost. So this way it's just outlining it to make it a thing. And so once that passes, they'll have more power to be able to at least allow that to happen without having to question it or make people take it away. And then sorry, I guess how long did I have?
Well, it's open, so you can continue. We'll talk more about specific instruments later if you want, but just short comments. If anyone is not muted, can you please mute yourself because we're hearing quite a lot of echo. Thank you. So Shelley, if you want to continue, of course. I would have a question actually already, because you were saying that, so you're trying to define a bit more what compost is, what it entails. I was reading in the Pittsburgh, the roadmap to zero waste, that the city actually plans to create a compost facility for food waste. So where does it stand currently? Are you still waiting to clarify more what compost would entail in the city, etc., or are you already involved in this composting facility?
Well, as part of the Adopt a Lot, people can use vacant lots to do composting as a main use. And I have a dream that instead of steel mills, we'll have little soil mills all around the city, like neighborhood-based composting centers, or like just composting, maybe a lot, so the neighbors would participate. It wouldn't produce, it wouldn't be a mass production facility. It would just be like neighbors getting together and composting, and that could have a really big effect, since we do have so many vacant lots all over the city.
Yeah.
So that's my dream, the soil mills. And we have.
It does make sense to make two resources kind of coincide, the vacant lots, and it does make sense to make those two resources coincide. And it's interesting to hear from city who are not planning to construct those big infrastructures for compost or compost facility, and are using the resources they already have for more like neighborhood scaled composting.
Yeah. Well, we've had studies done, and we've talked about doing a large scale composting operation, but it's the logistics and the feasibility studies all came back saying it was just too expensive, and it was going to be a big investment and not something that we were able to make at the time. I mean, perhaps now we would look differently at it, but we've had to come up with other solutions to some of these problems. We also had the same problem as Baltimore with the wood waste. It's a big problem. When I first started, I found out that we spent something like $50,000 a year having our trees and our wood chips hauled away, like taken to another state. I thought that is ridiculous. We have 7,000 vacant lots. We could just put them there. Didn't make any sense to me. So I've been working with the city forester and DPW on trying to do some sort of wood chip management program. And then also, you mentioned our roadmap to zero waste. So you can look that up online. It's actually it's really great, giving us a roadmap. But one of the things that we're working with Duquesne University on, they have a group of students who are working on feasibility studies for us to do bans around plastic bags and styrofoam. I think there's a third thing we're trying to ban, but because Pittsburgh is the classification of our city classification in the state, there are certain rules on us that aren't on cities like Philadelphia, or like that's a class 1 city or a class 2 city. We're the only class 2 city in the state, so we have like our own rules. But one of them is that when we pass things like bans or whatever, we can't put undue burden on businesses, which so that would be an argument that businesses would make, that the plastic is cheap, styrofoam is cheap, anything else would be more expensive. So that's something that we're looking at, and the justification for something like that. And Duquesne University students are helping us with that.
All right. Anybody would have a question for Shelley?
I have a question. This is Anne from Baltimore. So for your Adopt-A-Lot, so do you have leases with these folks who are doing work there, I would assume? And if so, how long is the lease? Because we have a problem. We can do up to a 5-year lease, but then it could be that the land could be sold to a developer or developed privately. So we're trying to figure out how to get longer-term leases for people to be able to stay on the land.
Yeah, that is a problem here too. What we've been able to do is we do the first initial lease is a 1 year, and then we do a 3 year, and then we can do repeated 3 years. And I think if there is a property that is on the verge of being developed, like we will know 2 years out, so people will have time to adapt, and they are meant to be temporary use of land. But I have all these dreams. I have a dream that we'll have these farms that will be more long-term, and city council can have say over the use of the land. So I'm hopeful that some of these that are becoming community assets will be able to, they're properties and sort of not just one parcel, but multiple parcels that each have different ownership issues and in some form of purgatory. So maybe they will stay more long term. I think that's a problem that we have, which I'm trying to use as an asset.
Hey, this is Kelly from the City of Buffalo, and I have a question for you.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, you said that you have a compost ordinance in place now. Is that available online, or could you share that with us? Because I know
it's not out yet. It's actually in the final process of being reviewed and vetted by our law department, and it should be going to council this week, next week.
Okay.
Hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just asking because I know for a couple of years now, too, in the City of Buffalo, composting ordinance is something we've talked about because composting is now written into our zoning code as an accessory use for all land uses, basically. But we don't have, like you were saying, a lot of guidance around what it looks like and how it's supposed to be housed. And I know it's a similar issue with our permits and inspections folks here. So,
well, there's a lot of information out there that can be helpful, and I can share some of the resources that we use. But what I learned is that everyone's municipal code has been built on they're all very individual. So you have to look back and see what else is in your code that must be reflected in or referred to in the compost part of it. It was a very complicated puzzle trying to dig through our 200-year-old municipal code.
Sure, yeah.
Do you have any sense of how much organic waste you are diverting?
Are you talking to me? Sorry.
Yeah.
I so far no, but we are doing the food waste data project with NRDC, and so that should help us to be able to at least get some benchmarks to start tracking that.
Have you done a waste audit to give you a sense of how much organic waste you had at a moment in time?
No.
So
I haven't. I mean, if it has been done in the past, but I haven't done that, and that's what we're doing with the food waste data project.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll be able to get an idea of that.
Are you one of many cities participating in that NRDC project?
I believe we are one of 10, yeah.
10. I'll have to look into that. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so now if that's okay, we'll move to the other side of the Atlantic towards European cities. And Zala from Ljubljana, if you could please tell us a bit more about Ljubljana's zero waste efforts. The floor is yours. No, we still can't really hear you. Can you try to speak loud and close to the microphone? Tiny bit better, but we can't hear you so well.
Now maybe?
Yeah, it's again a bit better.
Okay, I can change the computer. That's the only thing that I can do.
Okay, then maybe in the meantime, if that's okay for you, we would switch to Dortmund. Is that okay, Zala, if we leave you a bit of time?
Yes, okay, just continue.
Okay, great. Because we wanted to have the point of view of Christian Nehler from the city of Dortmund. It's interesting to have the point of view from a German city because Germany has had a strategy for diverting municipal solid waste from landfills and increasing recycling for over 30 years. And since 2012, 2013, the country has a circular economy law and a waste prevention program. And they made basically the collection of bio-waste and the local implementation of the waste management hierarchy mandatory. So it's quite interesting to see how this looks like in a German city like Dortmund. So, Christian, if you have any insight from the city on how waste management look like or waste prevention looks like, can you perhaps tell us a bit more?
Hello, let's first do a sound check maybe. Can you hear me clear and well?
Very well. Sorry.
Well, very well sounds good. First of all, let me apologize because there should have been a colleague here of mine who is much, much better informed than I am about the circular economy law. But I try to give you a rough insight as I have it myself. And also apologies a little bit for my English. Most of it is learned from certain Netflix shows. So first, the circular economy. We have like, if you look at linear economy, you have like resources, then you go into production, you go into distribution, consumption, and then trash, the thing we don't want anymore. And in the circular model, we not only try to look at natural resources, we also try to recycle in a way that we can start using this recycled stuff as a resource also. So we have two resource streams here, one with the natural resources and one with the recycled resources. And then in the first step, we try to build it into the design already. Like we try to pick up these streams of resources already in the design, meaning we want to pick it up at the beginning of production, but also want to think about it already, how we can, get rid of it or put it back to recycling at some point. Then you go the normal process, production, distribution, then you go into use. And in use, you also have the very important aspect of repairability. Like many smartphones today, for example, they are glued together, which doesn't really help you if your display is broken and you want to fix it. So you have to be able to take every device apart. But once that is done too, once there's no life expectancy left anymore, well, we go into collection and we try to separate already in our households. And then we look at the industrial recycling process. Important and kind of new is that we used to look at the input of recycled materials and said everything that goes into recycling counts as recycled. But now we are a step further and say, well, that didn't make too much sense because, yeah, sure, it's nice if stuff goes into recycling, but what about the outcome? What about the output? That's like where you can really say it's recycled, not because it's going in, but because it's coming out again. And so now we look at recycling plants and their output, so input is not as valuable anymore here. We have new laws for it. We try to up the recycling quota. By 2025, we try to have 55% of all recycled materials from municipal waste. And 10 years later, by 2035, we try already to have 65%. Then we also want to, we also make laws for production, like ecological design. You have to build it in, like here again, also the smartphone as an example. You cannot build things in a way that they are not repairable anymore. And there we also have another public instrument for the for the holistic approach of the municipal administration. We don't only look at waste, but we also look in the cycle of the lifetime cycle of a product at the point where we buy, where we make a public procurement as a municipal administration. So we only buy or try to buy at certain social and ecological standards. So we can, put it in the thinking at that point already. Very important, and that's the part where I work a lot personally, is together with citizens and their initiatives, because this is where the future ideas often lie for us. And one very important aspect for me in that scenario, working with citizens and initiatives, is that the ecological questions we face, I think, can only be answered through social perspectives. So in a way, you can think of sustainability as an extension of human rights. And the question is, how does it benefit a person to do ecological, to choose the ecological path? And we had a certain event here, which I organized in the summer. We called it the Day of the Commons. So commons, like the concept from Elinor Ostrom, who received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009. For her, a lot was a question of licensing. And that's why I come in as a public administration specialist. I give you one example by seeds. A lot of the seeds we have today are not able to self-reproduce anymore. We have so-called hybrid seeds. You can only put them once out on the field, and there we can observe a huge social dependency of the farmers towards agricultural businesses, like global super businesses, but we need self-reproducing seeds in order to adapt to climate change. And so we don't want seeds which are, so to speak, thrown away after one use. In that relation, we also have food sharing initiatives, who try to make the overproduction visible and try to make people and bring people and food which is left over together. So that's an aspect of reducing the production at that point. Another project in that sense we try to pull off right now is the reuse of sorted out computers from companies. Like in business, a computer could be possibly too slow, but for private use, people who live on social welfare or refugees, for example, they could reuse the computers we don't need anymore in the administration, and we put free and open source software on these computers, So similar to the open source seeds, which can self-reproduce, we put a software on it that people can use, which is not licensed commercially, so they don't have to pay. Another example is the Fairphone. If you might know it, the Fairphone is a company from the Netherlands who produce a smartphone where they try to have ecological and social standards. And very important aspect also there is the repairability. So they already give you the manual. They try to teach you how to repair things. So you can have like a relation to that object. And also we want to make a library of things, you know, for the social interaction, the social circularity, if you want. So people don't have to buy new. An example is, for example, an electric drill. We have a statistic here that says an electric drill is used probably about 8 minutes in its lifetime, and that's not very long for such a project, so we might as well share it. The most important insight from the Day of the Commons I can offer you in short is that we tried for zero waste. We try to also put a focus on relationship to the environment. So it's not sufficient if I only see myself as a consumer. I have to choose a more holistic approach. I have to be able to form a relationship to my environment. Like with a Fairphone, for example, I can have a relationship because I can take it apart, I can learn from it, I can change the features. It's not only something that sees me like a regular smartphone, that sees me as a consumer. And as a city, we think that open knowledge is very important, to have access to knowledge, you know, and to form a certain resilience to waste. And therefore we have 2 festivals here in our hometown, Dortmund, which are pretty much maker spaces. One is called Innovative Citizen. It's actually English. It's a maker fair who tries to build new things up from the ground. And then we also have a festival that's called Trash Up. Trash Up is also actually in English. I don't know why. And they try to, as you get from the phrase, you know, they try to upcycle. And for the festival, it's very important not only to cycle materials of the high value up, they try to really use everything, so nothing gets thrown away. And from there, I also got the idea of looking at festivals, music festivals, for example, as a closed ecosystem, if you want to, because they have everything from toilets, trash, beverages, food, and try to implant new insights at festivals, because that's at a scale where you can experiment or try out new stuff. And yeah, that would be my contribution so far.
Well, thanks a lot for this great contribution, really focused on redesigning and reuse and reducing. And it's interesting that you mentioned festivals, because a lot of cities are using this to create kind of a blueprint for what could be a closed loop at the urban level. There's an interesting publication from Metabolic on circular festivals in Amsterdam, and they've done some quite interesting things to test out technologies that they would like to implement more broadly in the city afterwards. I can share this afterwards, but for the sake of time, maybe. Zala, are you there now?
Yes. Okay. Do you hear me now?
We hear you very well.
Okay, great. Finally.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're a bit lacking of time now because we only have 30 minutes. So can you give us a quick overview of Ljubljana's zero waste efforts, and then we'll proceed to talking about specific instruments?
Okay. I would like to start with the organization of the waste management, because I think it's quite different from America.
Of course, you have already mentioned the regulations at the European level, which only name the goals, but not the way how to do it. But we also have some prescription on the national level, and waste management is described in national environmental law. As far as municipalities are concerned, we are taking care of the household waste. So we make a collection and pre-sorting of waste and landfilling, and industrial waste and part of separately collected waste is organized via extended producer responsibility schemes. We also have a city degree on waste management, and household waste is managed by non-profitable public company. So it's a public service paid by citizens, but the infrastructure is paid by municipality, and usually some bigger objects co-financed by the European funds. The average cost of waste management in Ljubljana per household is €8 per month. We have built one of the European newest regional waste management center. That was the biggest cohesion project in Slovenia that takes care of 1/3 of Slovene household waste. And it takes care of two waste streams: biodegradable waste, which is producing biogas and compost, and mixed residual waste is, let's say, separately sorted, and nowadays we landfill less than 5% of all collected household waste. The story of today in Ljubljana, we are separately collecting 67% of waste. The separate collection was introduced in 2002 when we have established so-called ecological collection sites, and at these sites the citizens could deliver paper, glass and packaging. And in 2006 we have added a separate collection of bio-waste. This was a very important turning point, because it has improved the purity of all separately collected fractions and the possibility of recycling. And the next third important turning point in waste management in Ljubljana was introduction of the door-to-door system in 2013, when we have finally brought the containers to the users for paper, packaging, biological waste and residual waste. So as I have already mentioned, today we are separately collected 67% of household waste. In the city center, we have introduced 66 underground collection units, and this has improved the cleanliness of the city and made it possible to withdraw more than 8,500 containers. In Ljubljana, we have also two waste collection centers where people can bring more than 30 different types of waste, and one reuse center. In 2014, we have become a member of the Zero Waste Network, and at this point, Ljubljana is the capital with the largest share of recycled waste. So in practice, we are strengthening the first three priorities in the field of waste management: prevention, reuse, and recycling. And of course, not working on landfilling and incineration. Maybe why we are so successful. The key ingredients for Ljubljana's success results were the introduction of door-to-door collection and well-managed communication strategy. In Ljubljana, or in Slovenia in general, we have a long tradition of educational projects starting in kindergartens. So also our public company has different project, is regularly visiting the city's kindergartens and is teaching children how to separately collect the waste. They have special mascot, a dragon, a friendly dragon, which is also very popular with children. As for other different initiatives on the circular economy, you have already mentioned the Cabine Cherignon, which is the first Slovenian clothing library. And this project promotes critical thinking and questions the ownership of constantly, buying new things and taking things for granted. And this is the name of a mobile platform that enables the users to rent items of clothing and fashion accessories made from Slovenian designers without any charge. So this project is very related to the uncovering the dark side of the fast fashion, which is also exploiting individuals and so on. So in Ljubljana we have also other different good initiatives, as the colleagues from Dortmund already said. The public procurement are a very nice instrument how to do it, and we think that we as a city have to be a role model for the citizens. So, for instance, we are using hygienic papers from packaging waste. We are also upcycling furniture. Kindergartens and public institutions are reusing the materials. Our public housing fund is using reused furniture. We already have the library of things. We are promoting short and green distribution chains, and so on. I'm not sure if I have enough time, but maybe that's enough for the beginning.
I suggest, because we all got patient talking about waste, that we jump forward a bit, and that maybe we can still continue talking about some initiative afterwards. So I wanted to take you through some instruments that can be used for zero waste, and we've seen quite a lot of them already during the discussion. Of course, the regulatory instruments, setting zero waste target, having ordinance, supporting extended producer responsibility rules, or zoning land, are all instruments. Economic or fiscal instruments are the ones where are instruments that stimulate actors to act in a certain way by rewarding or financially discouraging a certain behavior. One of the instruments that we didn't talk about is things like pay-as-you-throw schemes or fees implemented on disposable at the local level, which we can talk about a bit more if you're interested later. We talked a lot about zero waste procurement. Cooperative instruments came back a lot during the discussion. It's all those instruments in which the government, the local government, and or involved actors jointly decide to cooperate, and that's usually really used in the circular economy zero waste discussion to basically support already existing initiatives or creating public-private partnership. And then another instrument, knowledge and innovation instruments, which aim to develop shared knowledge between actors to promote innovation. And we've heard this through like having more knowledge about what actually is the content of the waste in a city, to better assess what this waste could go and be used by another actors, creating zero waste incubators for innovation, etc. And perhaps the one we've heard the most from the two European cities, Ljubljana and Dortmund, communication instruments on raising awareness on the different step of the waste management hierarchy. So we don't have as much time as expected to talk about instruments, but perhaps, Olli, I wanted to ask you if there was one specific instrument you wanted to discuss with the participants, or one specific policy you would like to debate, to have insights from Europe. I can leave you a bit of time to look at this. It's not exhaustive, and we had a lot of instruments during the call. So if you have an idea.
Oh, to pick one. So I guess when I look at our local context, we unfortunately passed a charter amendment that prohibits pay-as-you-throw for residential services. So that ties our hands a bit as to what tools we have available. So we have focused on the consumer education piece that our European colleagues both focused on. I guess because that is the most relevant to our work today, I'd be curious to know what strategies have been most effective, what has brought people on board.
Maybe Zala from Ljubljana, would you like to talk about all those campaigns you've conducted in Ljubljana?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest turning point in the visibility of our environmental initiatives were winning the title of European Green Capital in 2016. And in this year, we have you have to carry out a program during the whole year. And we have invited all the stakeholders on board. So local districts were participating, schools were participating, NGOs were participating, industry or public institutions were participating. I think that it is very important, firstly, to tell a story. Storytelling is very effective in regarding the sustainability and, of course, visibility of what you do. So by the end of the year, in 2016, we made a survey, and more than 90% of the citizens were aware of this title and why we have gained it. So it is very important to get the citizens and different stakeholders on board. And in this year, we have placed a special info point in front of the city hall, which is situated in the city center. And everyone got the chance to participate, to say something about it, to present their thoughts and their projects. So this was very well accepted by the citizens. So let them speak and get them involved.
When you say storytelling, what story are you telling?
Well, you know, when you introduce the let's say separately collected waste or food waste, or you were mentioning, then you have to have a story behind it. Why is it important? What does that mean? Do people actually are aware how much food they are throwing away? Or, you know, and you also have to make it fun, not just being negative about it, but it is more about pointed to a story. For instance, I don't know, we have this project which is called Robin Food. So it is a project that collects waste food from restaurants or from stores, and this NGO is cooking meals for homeless people, for instance. So this is one of the examples, or just let people know why they're doing it. It's not that they can relate to the topic, and that they see that they can participate and that it matters that they do participate. It's not something that the city does and, I throw something in the bin and I don't know what happens to it. It is your responsibility to know what happens to it, and you can help. And in the city, we all participate to a better green future, and you have to join us. And we can make it possible only if we cooperate. So this is storytelling.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question actually too, because overall, all along the conversation, one topic that came back a lot is organic waste as kind of a good step in a zero waste strategy. Perhaps I would like to have some insights from the city of Baltimore, from you, Anne, or Ava, on the city of Buffalo, of what instruments do you see particularly fit in promoting composting, etc. Perhaps if you can go a bit deeper into what we talked about in the beginning of the conversation, because I see it as I see organic waste as some kind as a waste stream that every city starts focusing on or has focused on. So maybe if we could go a bit deeper into this.
Well, for Baltimore, there are we have a number of organic waste food haulers who are working with larger organizations, universities and hospitals and others. We do not have a nearby composting facility, so the cost of hauling is higher than I think it should be. So we have a segment of the population who is aware and doing that. One of the things we hope to do in the next 2 years is to site a facility in the city. But we need a lot more education for our residents and our restaurants about food recovery and food waste. And that storytelling idea has just been showing up for me in different areas recently. I really think that's a great way to go, to use stories and talk about why things matter to people, why people should participate in things. I think one of the things we'll begin doing for our residents is having composting, a place to bring compost for people who live in smaller, dense homes who wouldn't compost at home. So have public places in our city parks and at our outdoor markets as a starting point to start the education process around that. And I think the Natural Resources Defense Council has a campaign called Save the Food, which is TV and billboards, and we can put it on bus stops and other places, and it tells stories around, like buying a strawberry and the life of a strawberry in the back of a refrigerator. So I think that's the way we need to start, just bringing awareness about this issue that people, I don't think about. That's one aspect.
So this is Kelly from Buffalo. I'll just add a couple of insights from our city before I actually have to jump off to catch another conference call. So a couple of years ago, about 5 or so years ago now, Buffalo started a relatively robust recycling and waste campaign called 34 and More. And that campaign was still oriented around reaching a landfill waste diversion rate of 34% in the city of Buffalo, because that's the state diversion rate, and we were very, very low. Weren't even close to reaching 34% a number of years ago, and now we're doing pretty well. Our new numbers haven't come out yet for 2017. They're working on wrapping those up right now, but I believe we are relatively close to achieving that 34% rate by the end of this year. But that included recycling. It included, more recently, it's included like repair cafes, so recovery and reuse, or not recovery, but reuse programs so that people aren't throwing things away. We have a number of different programs around yard waste and household organic waste, or not organic waste, hazardous waste. So it's a pretty comprehensive program that has been evolving and expanding every year of its existence. And just this year, the program piloted a household organic waste drop-off program with one of our urban agriculture and one of our composting facilities here in the city of Buffalo. So there's a lot going on within municipal limits. Some of the questions and problems we've run into, similarly to other cities on this call have expressed, are issues with corporate citizens, so large institutions and what they're doing around recycling and food waste and composting. That's been a challenge that we're having a conversation about specifically within the Buffalo Sewer Authority right now, and utilizing some of our biodigestion infrastructure that we have in place that's underutilized at the moment, and also city capacity for managing a new program that would be required for household organic waste, providing the totes or infrastructure at the household to be able to do that, and then having a facility within a hauling distance that makes fiscal sense for the city. So we do have a robust program. I'm happy to share any info people might have about 34 and more, but similar issues here as others have expressed on the call.
Okay, well, it will be great afterwards. You can share the program. I think that's very interesting. Anyone has a specific question to one of the participants?
This is Anne. I'm wondering if our European colleagues could share their municipal purchasing practices, because I think that's the direction we're going to start going as well.
No?
Hello, this is Chris from Dortmund.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. Well, for one thing, we have laws implanted from ranking from the state level to the federal level and even to the European level. So I think it took quite some time to implement these laws. But on the other hand, we also have self-rule as a municipal administration here, and so we can choose certain aspects of how we spend our community money. And there, we specifically in Dortmund, we have a mayor who tries to push social and ecological standards. It works very well in combination with citizen initiatives who are informed about how fair trade works, what kind of warranty seals for fair trade are acceptable and which one are not, which are rather problematic at the market. And from there on, we try to build our knowledge on what's socially and ecologically acceptable. And from there on, we also try to push boundaries by making the supply chains more transparent, so we can really tell the market what we want and what we do not want. So far from me.
Yes, and from Ljubljana, I would like to point out the thing that I already mentioned, is short and green distribution chains. So regarding the food in public institutions, I think also at the European level, there is a percentage, 20%, that can be bought outside the public procurement. So what we are doing is trying to connect the local farmers with the public institutions, for instance, kindergartens or primary schools, so that they get to buy the food directly from the farmer. So, and that has also a very good effect on their their menus because they are serving locally produced food. And another thing that we are currently working on is we have a public call we're looking for local products that are made in Slovenia, made from Slovenian material and don't include plastic. So we want to make a catalog of sustainable promotional gadgets that will be available to all our public institutions. And in the past, as my colleague already mentioned, the only possibility in public procurement was usually the lowest price. But now with this new green public procurement, you can also add different sustainable factors that are affect the end choice of the product.
Is there some way you can share some guidance or some guidelines that you've been using in some of the different areas of purchasing? Would you be able to send those over?
Well, it is already mentioned and made at the European level. So this green public procurement that I have already mentioned, and they have different guides with examples of how to purchase different items. I don't know, from energy to food to urban gardening and so on. So there, I think that about 12 to 15 different topics and guidelines that you can find.
I can also maybe just mention the fact that we shared in the knowledge bundle some links to reports from ICLEI Europe, who did 3 case studies and guidance documents for zero waste in procurements. So if you're interested, you can look at those and we'll share them again maybe.
This is Oliver in Cincinnati again. One tool that I don't see on our list and that hasn't really been discussed is the waste to energy conversation, whether that takes the shape of anaerobic digestion or burning waste for energy. I know that's taking off in some locations, and I'd be interested in an exploration of pros and cons of those solutions.
That's an interesting question, also because it's very polarized between the US and Europe, the topic of waste to energy. Perhaps Zala or Christian, if you have insights from your own municipalities. I know that from Germany, there's no landfill anymore, so methane capture doesn't exist really, but from incinerators maybe. What are the pros and cons? Did you find yourself maybe locked in long-term contract, or on the other hand, did you find it helpful if it's something you're doing?
Well, in Ljubljana, as I have already mentioned, we have this regional waste management center that is also processing the biodegradable waste, and the end products are compost and biogas. And this biogas is used as in the processes of the regional waste management. So it's a kind of closed loop. As far as I remember, in Ljubljana, we didn't have any discussions or something negative to say about it. It was, as you mentioned, it used to be waste, but now it is an input for something. So it's just about closing the loop.
Has that been well received?
Yes, I didn't hear anything about it because it is a side product of this technological process that is, going on. So instead of just releasing it, or yes, sometimes it is burned, but now we catch it and we use it for some good, something good. So we are not talking about waste anymore.
Good.
And maybe then what kind of crops are burned? Because we're talking about biodigesters from my understanding. So where's the waste coming from, maybe?
Well, we are separately collecting the bio waste. So it's mixed food and trees, I mean, parts of trees and bushes and so on. So it is mixed waste, green waste.
Okay.
Are any of the American colleagues implementing anaerobic digestion, biodigestion?
This is Baltimore. We have a new facility, as a matter of fact, being built by a European company that is going to be built in the location where we have all our wholesale organic food. So that is coming our way in the next year or two.
So is that owned and operated by the city or the home?
No, it'll be owned and operated by the European company, which I cannot think of the name of at the moment. Just outside of the city.
So did you play a role in landing them?
We did not, but we are connected to them now.
Okay.
Are you connected in binding terms? Do you have to provide then waste to this infrastructure?
No, they have enough waste. They feel from the wholesale operation and other haulers who are looking for closer places to bring food. So they can do it without the municipal involvement, which is not to say we could contribute towards it.
All right. Well, perhaps from the perspective of this presentation and what was presented in the beginning, it is at the very bottom of the waste management hierarchy, and it is because those infrastructures are then require such a high upfront investment. They also may lock local governments into a situation where they have to provide waste for a very, very long time, and then it may not pursue really the zero waste framework or ambition in terms of reducing at source. But of course, it's interesting to see how it reflects in different contexts, etc., and sometimes how little municipalities can have a say in this.
And they can handle bio-waste, right? So we have sewer sludge, and I don't imagine that going away, despite our waste reduction.
Yeah, sure, that kind of waste, of course. And the risk is always to create infrastructure that would tackle other kind of waste, such as or that would be reliant on being fed with crops, for instance, from monoculture, to then create bioenergy. Depends what kind of waste or resource you put into this, I guess.
Right.
So on that note, because we are running out of time, anybody else has another question or a burning question on a specific instrument or whatever? Otherwise, I think we can end.
I just would say that I love the Dortmund model of connecting, bringing in people and their relationship to zero waste and their relationship to their environment, and giving them the whole smartphone, the social ecological standard. I just love that aspect, and I think that's the way we all need to be moving on multiple layers. So kudos to you all. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a nice end to this webinar. It was very interesting indeed what you presented from Dortmund, Christian. So thank you very much for joining. I wish you a nice evening or a nice day if you are from the US. And we'll share the recording and the related materials on the Alliance platform and have it sent to you, Zala, directly. So thank you, and see you in the next exchange call.
Thanks for facilitating, Mary.